So I've got this Sony, it's a SXRD, silicon crystal reflective display is what Sony calls it. It's basically liquid crystal on silicon. Other companies call it different names. This one is a KDS 50 A2000. It'll also cover the 60-inch model as well as the KDSR 50 XBR1 and the KDSR 60 XBR1. And it's got a predominantly greenish yellow picture on this one, and it's due to lack of blue. If we go to a unused channel here, I'll just go to a channel with snow on it. You can see it's got a very green blob in the middle of the picture, and it's caused by a failing SXRD panel in this model. It is repairable, no problem. We can take care of this, we can make it look better, and I'm going to show you how. So just keep on watching. So because this one is a A2000 model and not the XBR1, I'll start with telling you how to remove the chassis out of this model. We're going to start by removing these three connectors up here. You'll also have to remove these two screws right here. They're ground screws. These cables can lift up out of the way. Remove the two connectors, the ground connectors from the bottom of the tuner antenna switch box. Kind of thread them out of the way here. Disconnect this one little connector over here on the side. And you want to remove this whole brace right here. One screw in the top, one screw in the bottom. So I've got the two ground screws out of this, so this whole bundle is loose. I've removed the two screws from this bracket. Once you lift up slightly, it can be kind of snaked out of the way. It has a little pin on the bottom of it, so it has to be lifted straight out vertically. Next, we want to go ahead and remove the lvds cable by pinching the two pins in on the side and gently unplugging it. Remove the ground wire, the data communication cable to the optical block, as well as fish this connector out and disconnect the two halves of it right here. Next, we want to go ahead and disconnect all these connectors. You can start by removing the ballast power connector, getting it out of the way. Have to undo all these purse locks here. Withdraw all the cables from them. And then just disconnect all of these cables that are up here. They only go back one way. You have to match color with color because you could interchange a couple of them between black and white. Once you've got that all taken care of, you can push down on these two little locks, or this one lock right here. The whole chassis will slide back. You just have to make sure that you clear all these wires. I've disconnected everything. Unhooked the lvds cable. I forgot to disconnect it from the little cable retainer that it was in. And then the whole chassis just lifts up completely out of the way, and it's now at this point I find it useful to go ahead and to reattach this other bracket back into the TV so it doesn't slouch down too far, because next we're going to remove the lamp fan ballast assembly, and we'll have to take this other bracket out next. So I have removed the two screws from the bracket. Lift up. Once again, it needs to be rotated back 90 degrees and lifted straight out of there. There is going to be one screw back in here. I don't know if you can catch it on the camera. It needs to come out so that we can start withdrawing the lamp cooling fan assembly. There's one screw under this cable tie up here. And once you get it pulled back just a little bit, You can take this one screw out right here. Once it's out, you can remove the cover for the ballast assembly. The whole ballast, there's no screws that hold it in place whatsoever. It can be just lifted out of here. Remove the antenna that's under the ballast. It sends a signal back so it knows when the lamp is lit. Remove the ballast cables out of the way. And the whole the whole lamp fan assembly can be taken out of the TV. Next, we'll go ahead and just take out the lamp. It doesn't need to be in here right now. And we'll start by removing the screws that hold the optical block cover in place. Hopefully you can see good enough here. Once you've got that done, remove these two cables that hold the lvds cables down. There's a latch right underneath here. You have to lift this one and this one up, kind of pull the whole assembly backwards and fish the wires out through the holes. Next, we'll remove part of the lamp block assembly out of the way by removing these screws right here. Once those are out of the way, this whole thing can be just pulled straight out and withdrawn from the TV. With the ballast. Next, we're going to address the front of the TV because there are screws that hold the optical block in. It's not ready to come out yet. So let's take the front of the TV out. Okay, with the door open, there's little catches. Each one of these tabs has a small catch under it. You just have to use just gentle pressure. This whole piece will just pop right off. And then there are two screws you need to remove. One, and the other one's in the middle of this right here. Okay, it's loose. So we'll turn the TV back around. And the whole optical block can be withdrawn from the back of the TV. Okay, so now that we've got the optical block out of the set, this is the top of it. I've zoomed in on it there so you can see it easily. You can start by just simply pulling out these two locking clips here. Release this one, you have to use a pair of pliers, and then this whole top plastic piece comes off. Now, essentially this is the same optical block that's used in the 50 and the 60 XBR1s. The only difference is the lens is different on them. And so what we want to go ahead and do at this point is we're going to remove all these cables from this. And that's done by just taking out these 4 screws right here. These two cables just have a push button in them that you have to push to release. And they just pull out. LVDS cables have the 2 side buttons you have to press. This one you just push down and pull out slightly. Once that happens, we can take these 3 screws out up here. And then we can take the cover off the SXRD drive board at this point. You may need a screwdriver. Yeah, this one came off pretty easily. And then all the cables and everything can be just set out of the way. Next, we'll go ahead and remove the screws from the drive board itself. Remove these three connectors. Just lift up slightly on them. The cables can be just unplugged very gently. They're just flat ribbon cables here. Once that's done, this whole board, oops, one more cable on the side for the iris. The whole board can be lifted out. Next we want to remove 1, 2, 3 screws. Make sure that you release these little tabs here, that these cables aren't locked in anymore, because they're going to stay when I pull the metal frame out of the way. It just lifts right out of the way. And then the next thing we're going to do is completely take the optical block apart. So disassembly of the optical block is pretty straightforward on this one. It's just a matter of removing the 4 screws. Once we get those out of there, the whole lens and optics panel can be lifted right out of the TV. So there are the 3 SXRD panels. Hopefully you can see them here. This is the one that we're going to be replacing, the blue one right here. It's labeled with the letter BZ on there. You can see that this one is the red, it says RZ, hopefully you can see it there. And then this one's the green one with the G right there. So here's the optical block out of the TV. I've already removed the 4 screws out of the bottom here. And so I'm physically holding the lens assembly onto the plate. It can be lifted right off here. Just one word of caution, if you're doing the XBR1 series, there's going to be a cam adjuster in this oval hole right here. Make sure you mark the location of that. On the A2000 series, the lenses are set. There's 2 pins in the bottom of it, and it can't be physically moved. But on the XBR1 series, there's only 1 pin, and so this end is adjustable with that cam. And you want to make sure you get it back in the exact same location. So you can just take the lens assembly off and set it aside, and what we're going to be doing next is just simply removing these 4 screws right here that hold the blue SXRD panel in place, and removing it and replacing it with a panel out of another TV. We're going to use either a red or a green panel, whatever we have available, because they're all actually the same panels. Inside here is where the reflective display actually generates the colors. So it's not the panel that makes the colors, it's the reflection that makes the color. That's why it's called a silicon crystal reflective display. So here's our cannibalized light engine that we're going to be removing the parts from. It's just a matter of removing the 4 screws. These slide out to the side. They have a rubber gasket that seals them in place. So this is the SXRD panel. Make sure that it's clean, that you don't get any spots on the actual panel itself. Okay, so I've got the replacement SXRD panel on here. I haven't tightened all the screws up yet, so what I want to do is I want to just take them and snug them until they're just barely snug. So they just make contact, back it off just a little tiny bit, because we're going to be actually using this to, a little bit of motion we're going to use to adjust the SXRD panel, because there is a bit of play and we need to adjust it so it lines up correctly. Okay, so what I've got here is this is a 60 A2000 that I've pulled apart, and I've actually physically cut the top of it off so I can put the optical block in it here. And what I've done on the optical block for this particular test jig that I've made is I've removed the cooling assembly. If you look at the block here, you'll notice it has these extra little pieces on there, and that's used in cooling the SXRD panel. This one I removed it so I can actually get to it and do the adjustments as necessary. And I've got the little fan that's going to be pointed up here to cool it. And so you can just see that I've got the good optical block sitting there I'm going to be repairing, and then the test jig that will hook up. So let's hook it up and get to aligning it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the optical assembly into place here. I'm going to attach it with 2 screws. That's just to keep it from moving. I'm just going to take the drive board here and I'm just going to attach these cables to it, because we'll be using this to align it. So now that those are attached, all I want to do is I'm going to take this cloth and I'm just going to set it up underneath it here to keep it from shorting out against anything. Right now, I'm just going to take the lens assembly. I'm not going to hook the iris up, because if you hook up the iris it'll get smaller and make it much harder to see, but I'm just going to set the lens back into its mounting location here. Once you get it in there, it'll fall like right into place. And it just sits there like that. And now I'm going to hook up the set and we'll fire it up and show you how to align it. Okay, so I've got the set up and running here, and what you need to do is move the lens out of the way to do the actual adjustments. You can see the panel. It's very hard to see, but it's right here. Oh, this thing's right in the way, isn't it? Yeah, the panel's right here, and you can physically move it up, down, right, or left, because I've left the screws loose. And let's see, I'll show you the pattern on the ceiling as I move. So after you've done a little bit of movement, you just have to take this lens, set it back in position like that, and then you can look up here on the ceiling. Let me turn off this light. It's very dim to see, but you can actually see that the I don't know if it'll show up on the camera or not, but you can see the blue is just slightly misaligned right there. Not by much. Might be acceptable. But let me see if I can just set the camera down here. Hopefully you can still see that up on the ceiling. And I'm reaching in here right now with the lens attached, and I'm physically moving the SXRD panel, and you can see how it becomes misaligned. And once we get it aligned just like we want it, just like that, you have to move the lens out of the way and very, very gently try to tighten up those screws, because you can see that the pattern's almost perfect on it now. One thing that's kind of handy that I'll do to check my alignment is I'll bring a piece of paper out here, and you can actually look at the piece of paper. You can see much closer on the piece of paper how far off the alignment is as I move it back and forth. So I can see that it's off by about a 1/16 of an inch there. I've got a crosshatch pattern on here so I can tell what the alignment is as I move this, sweep it across. It's almost perfect on this side, so that tells me that it's tilted ever so slightly. and just need to adjust the tilt a little bit. So with patience, you'll be able to get this thing aligned and get it looking good once again. So here's my final alignment. I've got it to within about half of one horizontal line, which is perfectly acceptable, and on this side it's more like maybe 3/4 of one line. So it's just barely off, but this is a 1080 test pattern, so under normal moving video you probably won't be able to see any of the errors whatsoever, but it's on there really close. So that's what the pattern looks like displayed up on the ceiling at this point. So let's put it back together, see what it looks like. Alright, so here's our set after we've got it reassembled. You can see it's got very good blue. I'll go ahead and I'll put it back on the channel that just had snow on it last time, and you can see that there's no big green blob in the middle of it anymore. It just looks absolutely fabulous now. It looks like a brand spanking new TV. Really good clear picture on it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Just one other thing I recommend on these sets to help prevent this from happening: go into the settings like I am right here, go to setup, go to cooling mode and switch it to high, and that increases the speed of the cooling fans by about 25% to help force a little bit more air past those panels to keep them nice and cool so they'll last even longer. Once again, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and look for my other videos. Thank you.